Lusk here of Lusk Archery Adventures. Series testing, successful hunting. Well, it's 2024, and with a new year comes a new improved broadhead test process. I've got over 300 broadhead test videos here on my channel. I can't believe there's so many, but there's always more heads to test. And each year I try to evaluate my testing process and see what is working, what's good, and what can be improved upon. And man, there's no perfect way to test broadheads, but hopefully I'm getting better and better, and my process is evolving more and more each year. And that's what I'm going to be introducing in this video. What are some of the things that I'm adding in or changing for 2024? But I want to start by saying the whole goal of my broadhead testing in all these videos, the whole goal of the process is to help you, the viewer, make the best choice possible as for which broadhead is going to go on the end of your arrow. Our hunting needs vary, our hunting style varies, the animals we're pursuing varies, our bow and arrow setup varies. There's so many different variables. So how do you know which broadhead to choose? And I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of different broadheads to choose from. Do you just look at which one has the coolest package, or read some of the information on the back of the package? Do you ask some of your friends and they're going to tell you whatever they killed their latest big buck with, oh man, that's the best broadhead in the world, or whatever one they didn't kill the buck with, oh man, that broadhead sucks. There's a lot of different anecdotal evidence from friends out there. How do you know which broadhead to choose? Well, I can't tell you, but I can help you along that way. I can help you have more information. And that's the goal of my channel, to provide really data-driven information that's comparatively based. It's done under consistent, uniform testing, so there's comparative data points that can be used to compare one broadhead to another. And by you evaluating this test that I come up with and these different data points, you can figure out which broadhead might work best for you. That's the whole goal of all of it. And I test in 5 different areas. I think there's 5 crucial areas when it comes to a broadhead's lethality. The first is flight. It's got to fly really well, right? Okay, the second is the blades themselves, the sharpness, edge retention, ease of replacement or resharpening. Third is penetration. How well does it penetrate? The fourth is durability. How well does it retain its integrity and its structure and its blade and ferrule and so forth? And then the fifth is cut size. What's the total cut size? And so each one of those I give a 20%, I give 20% weight to the overall score based on a 100-point scale, and come up with a corresponding Lusk grade that rates the broadheads based on 0 to 10 golden arrows. And again, that just corresponds to the overall numerical grade. And I've got all kinds of working formulas that I use to calculate that, okay? It gets pretty complex. That's the engineer in me. I'm constantly evaluating it too. How can I get better and better at it? But you can read about that in the description below each video. I explain all the tests and why I do what I'm doing. But let me share some of the differences this year. First of all, I've got a new bow, and I'm really excited about my bow. I'm using, I don't know if you noticed the hat here, but I'm going to be using the Elite Era, okay? This actually came out last year, but it's a fantastic bow. It's got a longer axle, the axle that I've been using, and a really nice brace height, a generous brace height. So it's a very forgiving bow, and yet it really generates some great speed in a very lightweight package because it's carbon. So I'll do another video where I go through the details of this bow, but man, I am loving this bow setup, okay? So that's the first thing that's going to be different this year. Another thing, okay, let me just go through with each of the tests. First of all, for flight. Here's the thing about broadhead flight. I can get pretty much any broadhead to fly well for me, okay? And you can too, with a well-tuned bow, with a properly spined and built arrow and the correct fletching and decent form, you can get pretty much any broadhead, even a big fixed broadhead, you can get it to fly well. And so I always have this challenge in my testing, like, well, they all kind of fly well, so how do I decide, which one is more forgiving than the other? And I understand there's some basic principles, like the more surface area there is, the less forgiving by and large it's going to be in flight. But I've come up with a new way, a new tool that I'm going to be using this year that I'm really excited about. And that is, then I'm going to drum roll, I'm using a crossbow, okay? Now I know this is controversial. Probably some people just cut me out right there. Okay, stop the video. Okay, John's using a crossbow. Okay, haven't gone to the dark side. But I tell you, crossbows are pretty fun to shoot. I don't know if you shot one. And this is one made by Killer Instinct. I mean, look at the size of this. This is it just feels wicked cool, okay? It's a nice, tight little bow that generates like 400 plus feet per second. So pretty good speed-wise. And it uses a barrel rather than just the typical slide, and that's just going to aid in accuracy, or so they say. Comes with a nice scope and stuff. So what this allows me to do is to mount the crossbow in a bog tripod, like a really good tripod, where it is like in a vise. And then, man, I can literally punch the field point through the crossbow bolt like in the bullseye every time. It is locked and loaded. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot one with the field point like that, and then using the same bolt, I'll pull the bolt, and then using the same bolt, I'll screw in the broadhead, and I'll shoot that at 20 yards, okay? And I'll see what's the variance from the field point. There's nothing else that's affecting the flight of that other than the broadhead. So now again, I can get pretty much any broadhead to fly decently out of my vertical bow. But this is a way to evaluate at very high speed what impact is there just from the broadhead itself. And believe me, it exposes any and all little ramifications like that. So take it for what it's worth. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm going to be experimenting with different bolt weights and speeds and so forth. But so far, it's proving to be pretty interesting. And it gives me a more objective way to determine the flight. And I have a little formula that I'm going to use based on how much variance there is between the broadhead and the field point. It'll get a score, and that'll be weighted 20%, okay? Then the next thing that I'm testing is the blades. And you've been seeing me doing this in the last few years, but I've got a new model of this edge on up sharpness tester. And this is like the really nice model, where rather than rounding the pressure it takes for an edge to break through this little copolymer wire in grams, rather than average it to the nearest 25 grams, it breaks down per gram. So it'll give a much more specific number and detail about the sharpness. So I'll do that initially with a brand new head and see the initial sharpness. It'll get a corresponding grade. And then after one of the penetration tests, penetration test 1, I'll explain that in a second, it gets a little bit dulled, right? So then I do it again, I test the sharpness, and that I use to calculate the edge retention. And then the third thing is I give somewhat subjective assessment of how difficult or easy it is to resharpen or replace those blades. So that's in the blades, that accounts for 20% of the score as well. Then the next is penetration. So for the penetration, basically the same. I use this Clear Ballistics FBI grade gel. It's clear gel, which is nice so you can see the broadhead go into it. You can see how it opens and so forth. But just gel is not the best medium to test penetration, because the gel tends to stick to the broadhead and stick to the arrow shaft as well. So what I do is I mount in front of that, I put a 1/2 inch layer of MDF sandwiched between 1/3 to 1/3 inches of rubber foam mat. So it has that initial rubber foam mat. It's kind of like hide. It's got the MDF, kind of like bone, and then it's got the clear ballistic gel, kind of like tissue. So that's the idea, and I measure how much it penetrates, how deeply it penetrates in that regard. So that's penetration test 1, and then penetration test 2 is layered cardboard. I just shoot it with a little bit lighter setup. I shoot it into the cardboard, and the total number of layers gets calculated into a numerical score. So those are the 2 penetration tests that I'm using. I'm not going to be doing the angled penetration test. I did that for a couple of years, and I just concluded it wasn't worthwhile. Okay, it's like what happens is whether the broadhead, I don't have a broadhead just sitting here, but say this is a broadhead, whether the broadhead strikes it like with the blades in this position versus this position makes a big difference in how they fare in that test. So I'm all about consistency, and so I just eliminated that. And really, with most broadheads today, there's not much of an issue when it comes to angled shots. However, if there is a broadhead that I suspect could have a problem on angled shots, then I'm going to note that, and it might get a deduction in the bonus category. The bonus category I give like plus or minus, just small amounts based on design features, either positive features or negative features. So that's the penetration test. And then the 4th category is the durability test. And this is again 20%. Each of these are 20% of the total score. So the durability test, the bulk of the score, 12% of it, goes to MDF. I just shoot the broadhead 3 times through a 1/2 inch of MDF. And it's a decent medium. It's consistent, unlike plywood where there's grains and knots and so forth. It's somewhat consistent. And so it provides a good way to test the overall structural integrity and durability of a broadhead. If it does perfectly through 3 shots of the MDF, it gets 12 points, most of the points. Then I shoot it through 22 gauge steel plate, okay, sheet of steel right here. And so I shoot it twice through that just to see what kind of damage is done to the broadhead. And then that accounts for 5% of the overall score. And then the final durability test I do is I shoot it into cinder block. That accounts for just 3% of the overall score. Now I want you to know that is not a pass-fail test. There's sometimes people just go, oh, that broadhead is crap because it blew apart on the concrete. Well, no, that's just 3% of the score by design, okay? But you know, I know we don't hunt animals that are sheeted with steel and built on concrete or cinder block. I understand that. But I want to test the outer limits of what a broadhead can and cannot handle. I want to push it to the limit. I want to see, can it handle this? Can it not? If that doesn't matter to you, then disregard that. I just want to provide the data points. You take them or leave them. And also I will say that I've seen heads do fairly well in a cinder block test, but then you hit a heavy bone at an angle, like on a hog femur or something, and man, I've seen those broadheads get bent terribly. And so what happens in the real world in animals is sometimes even more damaging to a broadhead than what happens with sheet metal and cinder block, believe it or not. But that's a durability test. That accounts for a total of 20%, again, of the score. And then the final is cut size. Just what's the cut size? And I quantify what's the initial cut, because some mechanicals have a small initial cut. What's the initial cut, the entrance cut? What's the maximum total cut? And what's the maximum diameter? Because I found that the wider a cut is, it tends to make a better hole, and there tends to be a better bloodletting from that. So I quantify all that, and that accounts for 20% of the score. Now, some people suggest every year, why don't you do a drainage test? And people who followed me know that for a while I did do drainage tests. And I tried every medium I could think of. I mean, I used like plastic water bottles. I used milk jugs. I used Ziploc bags. I even special ordered the most the thickest Ziploc bags there was anywhere available that I could find. And I marked meticulously this water level and, you know, where I was going to hit. And then I found that those tests are completely just useless because they're completely inconsistent. I would have the same broadhead hit in the exact same place, and one time it would drain the bag in, say, 3 seconds, and the next time it would drain the bag in 1 second. It was completely inconsistent. Whether that flap of material goes in or goes out, whether the arrow rotates with the blade down or the blade horizontal, All that makes such a difference. I've eliminated that test, and I don't trust any of the tests like that I've ever seen. Maybe somebody has an idea of a drainage test that can be consistent, but I haven't found it yet. So I just count the total cut size as one of the factors. So those are the 5 factors that I use in the testing: the flight, the blades, that's the sharpness and edge retention, the penetration, the durability, and then the overall cut size. And again, that gets combined to get a maximum score of 100, and then that correlates to 0 to 10 golden arrows, okay, the Lusk grade. Now what's interesting, you end up seeing a lot of broadheads that score like in the 70s or 80s, and sometimes people go, oh, this isn't good because they're all kind of bottlenecked in that same area, but they get there in different ways. Some may get there because they have a really wide cut. Others may get there because they penetrate really well, or they fly really well, or others because they're super durable. They all get there in different ways, and that's why it's important to go in and see how and why they got the score they got in each of these 5 major areas. So what I'm going to do differently this year is I'm going to add a lot of that information into the video itself, to where just watching it, you see the score that it got for durability, for example, or for penetration. It's just going to be listed right there in the video, as well as, like always, it's going to be provided in the description below the video. Oh, and one thing I'm also going to be doing this year is at the end of every video, I'm going to list all the discount codes that I have for broadheads or for other archery gear. Sometimes companies just give me a discount code, and so I love to pass those on to you, and you can save some money by using the discount code. For some of them, I get a little commission as well every time it's used, so it's kind of a win-win situation. But I'll list those at the end of every video, so you have that, and it will continue to be in the video description right below the video as well. So that's the testing for this year. Oh, and for the arrows, I'm going to continue to use Bishop Archery FOC King arrows for most of the shooting. I'll continue to use the Bishop Fat Eliminators for the really hard impact stuff because they can handle it. They're just so doggone durable. And I will say, thank you all so much for donating broadheads. If you'd like to donate a broadhead, just reach out to me. I just need 3, at least 3 new ones. 6 is even better, but at least 3 new ones in order to do a proper test. And if you're interested, and if I've not tested it, which sometimes people ask, have you tested this? Have you tested this? If you go to YouTube and just type in Lusk and then the name of any broadhead, if I've tested it, it's going to come up. If I haven't tested it, it won't come up. So that's a good way to know whether I've tested something. But if you want to donate a pack of heads I haven't tested, please reach out to me and do so. I really appreciate it. We all benefit from that. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for all your viewing, your encouragement, your subscribing, hitting that bell so you get notified when new videos come up, and for passing them along to your friends and sharing them with your friends. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The channel's been getting more and more successful, and it's really just because of viewers like you being such an incredible base to help spread it. As well as I welcome all of your comments, questions, input, suggestions. I really like kind of working together, collaborating to make this, again, a really helpful endeavor to help all of us choose the most lethal broadheads we can to take out the animal, to harvest the animal as ethically and quickly as we possibly can. So good luck to you here in 2024. I look forward to starting to drop a bunch of videos in the upcoming days.